AS Business from November 2021 just became available. So we're going to take a dive in and have a look at the most difficult papers, the most difficult questions, and think through how we could have scored maximum marks in the time that we had for those questions. Remember, if you haven't done so already, subscribe, because we're going to have a look at paper 2 and paper 3 and also the IGCSE papers when they become available. And if you really want to take your learning to the next level, head to the EDS Business Essentials website. So let's get stuck in. So we're going to look at the most difficult paper in the November 21 series for paper 1. And that'll be the paper with the lowest grade thresholds. So as we can see here, it's paper 13. So let's dive in and have a look at that. So just looking at the section A questions for the first one, define the marketing mix. Well, that's fairly straightforward. Explain 2 ways that a business can use place. That's straightforward as well. So they can figure out their distribution channel, try and make it convenient for customers. Remember, we need 2 sound explanations for the B questions. The next one is define the term business stakeholders. So that's anyone with an interest in the business activities. And for this one, you might want to give examples, different business stakeholders like employees, local community, owners, shareholders, and so on. And for the second part, where we need 2 sound explanations, that's going to be really useful when explaining why conflict might arise, because conflict is going to arise when 2 different stakeholders have opposing interests. But then we're going to need to give an example. So owners may want higher profits, but employees may wish to have higher salaries or higher pay. So far so good. The third one, where we need to have an effective explanation of human resource management. Well, for that, we need to explain why human resource management is so important, and then go into the different functions of human resource management. So training and development, ensuring the happiness and the welfare of the employees in the organization. So again, it's fairly straightforward. And our final one is published accounts. So we can just say that they're financial statements produced once a year, sent to shareholders, and maybe give an example. So you could have the statement of financial position or the income statement. 2 limitations, well, that'll be that they can be manipulated in terms of window dressing, or they may be badly audited. And you can talk about how they're quantitative rather than qualitative or historical, or any of the limitations of published accounts, just 2 sound explanations. So section A is not where students were struggling, I would guess. So let's try section B. You can find detailed question guides for each of the questions on paper 1 and paper 2 in the AS Business membership. So section B is the only opportunity in AS where we get to actually decide on a question, and we've got a choice of 3. So we really want to spend a little bit of time just going through each question and figuring out which one we're going to maximize our marks on. We also have to remember that we're going to have more time relatively compared to paper 2. We're going to have 50% more time on paper 1 for answering these questions. So we do have a little bit of time to really think through which of these questions is going to work best for the amount of knowledge that we have and what we're comfortable in answering. So let's have a look at the 3 different questions. The first one is question 5, and that's on operations. The first part looks at just in time and the advantages for a business of using just in time. So remember, we just need to focus on the advantages, and then think about just in time and the inventory. So we need at least 2 good chains of analysis for these questions. So we can talk about the advantages of just in time in reducing costs. It means that they're not going to have to store the materials or the components at the actual factory itself. It means the employees can focus on manufacturing. It also leads to a whole culture in the workforce where the workflow is more efficient. So this one, it seems fairly straightforward, although it's not really specified to a particular type of business. For the second one, it's the importance of operational flexibility and innovation. So I'm guessing that's operational flexibility and operational innovation, and that's to a multinational car manufacturer. It's really important that we add the context in these questions. Remember that you're going to have 6 evaluation points. We really have to feel comfortable with the context and be able to evaluate from the perspective of a multinational car manufacturer. So for operational flexibility, that's producing different types of cars and being able to change production levels. And operational innovation is being able to produce those cars by using innovative methods, like using the computer-aided management and computer-aided design, for example. And our evaluation is going to come from a judgment on how important operational flexibility and operational innovation is to a multinational car manufacturer. We could also talk about whether operational innovation is more important than operational flexibility. We could also talk about is if it's something which is just developing at the moment, so it's going to be important in the short term, or it's going to be important in the long term. We can talk about its impact on costs. We could also make a judgment on whether, because all car manufacturers are now having to be operationally flexible and use innovation in their production processes, how important is that actually going to be? And we could also think about multinational. A lot to go on there for our evaluation. I can see though that perhaps some students might have just gone for innovation generally, car manufacturers, so they're going to be operating in different countries. It may depend on the country that they're operating in, how important that operational flexibility is. So our next question is the 20-mark question. If you're confident with structuring those longer essays and also talking about motivating employees, this could be the question for you. The key thing is to remember that it's motivating an employee in a customer service call center business. So that's very specific. These are the people who answer calls. Let's say it's a computer hardware business. People call in, they may have to deal with complaints. So we really got to think through here, is the economic man theory what's going to best motivate those employees? So is money the only thing which is going to motivate those employees to work harder and to be more productive? And also, are we going to pay by results? And is it going to be possible to measure results for a call center business, like how many complaints you deal with, how many customers you deal with? Is that actually going to lead to better customer service if employees are thinking about how many complaints and calls that they get through each day rather than doing what's best for the customer? So with our evaluation in this question, it's really going to come down to how much we believe that the economic man theory is going to be the best way to motivate employees. What other factors are going to motivate employees? Which ones are going to be more effective? And you might want to think about different motivational theories and what they place emphasis on. Ultimately, I think with this one, it's fairly straightforward that it's not just going to be money, it's going to have to be the working conditions and how the staff feel valued and how they feel as part of a team, because it can be quite lonely. I know from experience being in a call center and just having to continually deal with calls. So no matter how much money you give someone, they are unlikely to be motivated by money alone. You can also think about how individuals are motivated by different things, and you might want to also evaluate by thinking about what the objectives of the business are and what they actually want to achieve. So it may vary from the corporate culture of one company to another. So for our final question, we've got questions focused on entrepreneurialism, but the first part is on break-even analysis. And it's not asking for an evaluation, we just have to analyze how break-even analysis might help an entrepreneur make decisions about starting a new business. So they can see the break-even level, how much they're going to have to produce to cover costs, which can then lead them to think about having to reduce costs and think through that process. And also setting price levels would be the first two kind of chains of analysis that I'd work through on this one. The more difficult question looks to be the second part, because it's asking us to discuss the possible challenges in starting a new business only selling vegetarian food products. So this is a question that perhaps, just like the multinational car manufacturer or the call center business, you need to know a little bit about the context about vegetarian food products. It's a growing trend. It's said to be healthier. It's also better for the environment. So the possible challenges could be the current moves towards vegetarian food products may not last a long time, or It could be that in the particular country, resistance to just vegetarian food, people believe in the more traditional type diet. It could also be that there's already lots of new entrants, because it will depend a lot with vegetarian food. In some countries, there's already a developed culture of vegetarianism. There's companies here who are moving in on that already. So our evaluation will come from making the decision, but what's going to be the biggest challenge for the entrepreneur? Because entrepreneurs are going to have lots of challenges apart from difficulties with setting up a vegetarian company. They're going to have all the difficulties that an entrepreneur has, where they have to do everything from scratch. They have to raise finance. They have to be able to organize. They have to be able to do accurate market research. So deciding what is the most difficult challenge that they're going to have to overcome, and how much of an impact choosing to sell only vegetarian food products is going to have on that. You could also talk about long-term and short-term. So in the short term, it might just be getting the business off the ground, but then in the long term, it could be how many competitors enter the market, or how trends change for vegetarian products, because some people may view it as a bit of a fad and we don't have enough research on the vegetarian diet and whether it's going to last in the long term. So for this one, you can see what we got to do is really think through each question and how well we're going to be able to answer those questions. And there could have been some of those where you're getting a bit stuck, where maybe with the customer call center business, you weren't that sure about the context there, or perhaps with a multinational car manufacturer. Make sure you've got enough evaluation to go on so you can score those 6 evaluation points. And you can build those chains of analysis in the question on which you decide, then create a plan from there, and then go into answering your question. You can find detailed question guides for each of the questions on paper 1 and paper 2 in the AS Business membership. The next paper that was most difficult, according to the grade thresholds, was paper 11. So if we look at question 5, whenever most students see overdraft and sources of finance, they run a mile, and then we have financial accounts. But this one actually is, in my view, it got a little bit more of a focus on social enterprises. If it's not financial accounts, how are we going to measure the performance of a social enterprise? You could go quite into the aims and objectives of social enterprises and use examples there. Okay, so let's go into the 20 mark question. It's another one which students tend to avoid. And this one is just like it was in the last paper. It's based on Unit 2. In this case, emotional intelligence. So it's going to be talking about why emotional intelligence is important, but then why other things are important. This one, the business leaders and managers of a school. So I've worked in many schools where I might have questioned the emotional intelligence of the business leaders or managers of a school. But we also have to remember that it may not just be the principal and the school leadership. Often there's a financial team, and there's a board of directors or a board of governors in a school as well. So we'd have to think about that. So potentially this is a question where you could score lots of marks, but also it looks a little bit tricky to me. And then for the final question, how business might use the internet in 2 elements of the marketing mix. Okay, so for someone who spends all their time just marketing on the internet and the impact of digital marketing now, it's not going to be difficult to come up with 2 ways that you're going to use the internet. And then the second part is that traditional retail stores are going to have to change their activities to compete with online retailers. So again, this is something which is really been in the business news, and it's a really hot business issue at the moment. And you're going to find that in nearly everyone's country where there's this competition from online retailers. So if you're comfortable with the context and you've actually shopped online and you're aware of retail stores, you should have lots of potential evaluation on that one. So I'd say most students would have gone for 7 on this one, and there was lots of potential for scoring high marks if they chose that one. The other ones were accessible but a little bit trickier. For more than 70 AS Business practice questions, join the AS Business membership. So paper 12 was the easiest. You had to score the most marks in order to get a high grade in this paper. And we can see that for the short answer questions, they're all really straightforward kind of stuff that you would see in a textbook. There's really nothing which anyway tricky in these questions. So let's go on to section B, and we've got our always popular marketing product first. So how marketing can add value. Oh, this is an interesting one. So the setting of effective marketing objectives is the most important factor for the successful launch for a new women's football team. For those people who don't know what football is, they've helpfully put soccer in brackets there. Thank you for that, Cambridge. So this is one where there's definitely potential for lots of marks there, but some students may see that you see marketing and they feel more comfortable with marketing and jump straight in there. But there's actually quite a lot to unpack in that question, because first of all, it's objectives. So you got to talk about why effective marketing objectives are important. Then you've got to talk about why other factors are important. And remember, you're really focusing on a successful launch of a new women's football team. You got to think through, well, what does that actually mean for a successful launch? Is this a women's football team they're hoping to get lots of supporters and going to stadiums, or is this just an amateur team? You got to think through what the objectives are. So I'd argue that one's actually quite tricky, even though it's a marketing question. The next one is the 20-mark question, which can be more challenging in terms of having to structure, but it's democratic versus autocratic, which is going to give us quite a lot to talk about. Where students may struggle is that it's in a hospital. So whenever people think of hospital, they think of doctors being in charge, but it's actually hospital managers and business leaders. You're going to decide what the key performance indicators are for that hospital, and then it also depends if it's a hospital in the private sector or in the public sector. So in many countries there isn't a public health system, so people have to pay for medical care. So there's a lot of clarification for this one too. And the final one is a question on finance. So the first one is, you got to know what debt factoring is, to be able to build up at least 2 good chains of analysis on debt factoring, and then discuss the most important factors for a venture capitalist to consider when deciding to provide potential growth capital for a computer games retailer. So lots of potential things to get tripped up on here too, because it's not a computer games developer, it's a computer games retailer. If anything, these questions really seem a little bit trickier than the last paper, but what you need to do in that situation is really think through each question, make up a brief plan, and think about the evaluation points and the analysis points that you're going to be able to score for each one, and then make your decision on which one you're going to be able to get maximum marks on. So that brings to our end our first exploration of paper 1 AS Business. Remember to like this video and subscribe, because we've got other past paper takedowns coming up. And if you really want to take your learning to the next level, head to the EDS Business Essentials website, click in the link in the description, and you'll go right there. Okay, see you next time.